Hi there and welcome to Brannon Construction. Today we're going to walk you through how to hang a door. So the things to look for, the material that you're going to need, and the tools. So to kick this off, we'll start with the jamb. You need a jamb that fits the width of your wall. So here we have 1/2 inch drywall on either side of a 3.5 inch wood stud wall. So this jamb is 4 5/8. The jambs are mortised on a pre-hung kit for the hinges and the latch plate from the doorknob. So you've got 3 pieces total, 2 legs and a header. You need your door stop, hinges that are going to match the height of the door hinge that's mortised out on your jamb and on your door. You're also going to need some shims, and we like to use these guys, 2.5 inch wood screws to secure our jamb to the 2x4 wall around the perimeter of the framing and the rough opening for the door. The basic tools that you're going to need to do this task are for hand tools, utility knife, side cutters to cut a brad nail should it blow out. You can trim it up and set it. Of course, a tape measure, a good sharp wood chisel, a hammer, sliding square for marking your reveals, speed square, always handy to have, and a flat pry bar just for fine tuning your door jambs. That'll pretty much have you covered for most of the hand tools you'd carry in your pouch. Also here we'd have a 2-foot level for our headers and a 6-foot level to do our jamb legs, so you can make your door jamb plumb, level, and square. For power tools, you're going to need an air compressor and a hose. We're using an 18 gauge brad nailer. We'll use both 2 inch and 1.25 inch brad nails. We use an oscillating cutting tool, and I can show you where this tool is handy and how it can come into play should things be a little bit different or something's out slightly with your floor. We've got both an impact drill and then just a regular drill. Either or will work. I'm using both because it's just convenient not to switch the bits throughout the process, and I have that. So also to do your trimming, you're going to need a miter saw, and we'll get a clip of that a little later throughout the process while we're casing the door. So those are the basic tools that are going to get you through this install. Things can change and people will often use maybe slightly different tools, but this is what works for me, and it's fast, efficient, and quite easy. It simplifies the process. So now we're going to help you with the preparation of the jambs. We'll kick this off again. We want to start with why we get it pre-hung. It's more efficient. The trim shop where we buy our trim and doors, they have machines that can do these, and they can do it a lot more efficient than we can on site with routers and jigs to mortise all these hinges and to the jamb, latch plate, and the hinges into the door. So we get them all prepared, and they can even help you cutting down your doors should you need to do that, if you can provide them with all the information before you go ahead and order, of course. So we've already prepped this. I'm going to go through quickly on basically what we've done here. So the first thing that we've done is we've marked 2 inches because we have an 1 3/8 door and an 1 1/4 wide stop. We make a 2 inch mark across the jamb, and that will show us where we can put all our holes and where we can fasten this jamb, where the door stop will cover. So it saves us a whole lot of filling and stuff like that if we can get these fasteners behind that door stop. So what we do is we mark it, and then we take this countersink bit and we countersink holes, and then we just clean the little burr off with the chisel so it's nice and flat, and when our stop is installed, then it'll sit nice and flat. It's not forced out at all. Lastly, what we do is we use this special bit, and there's various different ways to do this. This is probably one of the more efficient ways, but simplified ways of doing it is getting one of these special bits that has a sliding collar. And what that does is it allows you to line up your hinge perfectly in the mortise and then plunge your bit down. So it puts the holes exactly where they need to be for this hinge to sit in there tight and in the position it should be, because that's quite important. It'll throw your door out or make it challenging for you to pull your door on and off throughout, the trim and paint process, but also in the future. If your hinges are all crooked and messed up, you're gonna have some challenges with getting things plumb level and square and your door functioning well. So this is the jamb preparation. We do this because it's much more efficient. If we do all our doors like this, and we prep all our jambs at the same time, it makes the install process much faster and also easier. It's not quite as much effort because you're not on your hands and knees or up on your two-step trying to drill these holes. So now on to assembling your jamb. A few things you want to look out here for is that your jambs are actually oriented in the direction that they should be. So when you put that door up, it works with your left hand or right hand swinging door. For interior doors, which we're covering, in swing, out swing is still a term you can use, but it's not as important. Basically, the two things you need to know here are that it's a left hand or a right hand door. An easy way to do that is if you could imagine the rough opening, you set your back against the hinge side, and if it's swinging left like this, you want, or would call that a left hand swinging door. And then obviously if it was swinging right from that point where you have your back against the hinge side again, it would be a right hand swinging door. These jambs are actually machined in such a way that just flipping them end to end on the hinge side will switch the door swing for you. So that's because the top and bottom hinge is mortised exactly the same off of each end of that jamb. So this makes this process a little easier when you've got both doors in a space. You don't have to necessarily worry about mixing these up. Now the latch side, however, is not like that with these pre-hung doors. And also the hinge side isn't always like that too, so you want to watch out for that. They're not always like that, that's just the way we have them done. But this latch side, you need to make sure that this measurement, 36 3/4, correlates with where the latch is going to be and where the knob and hole is drilled out on that door. So this is 36 plus the 3/4 inch space that the door should have on the bottom after the install is complete. That tells us that this is oriented the right way around. So if you nail all this together and you get it standing in your rough opening, you're going to find that if you don't have all this in order, that it's not going to work. You're going to have to bring it back down, take it apart, and flip something around and reassemble. So how we like to assemble the header to the jamb legs is just with a little bit of glue there on the butt end of this header. It is a butt joint and the header is inserted inside the jamb legs, not on top. Again, some people choose to put that header on top and they cut it that 1.25 inches longer. And then we literally just hold this flush and nail. So we'll let it sit, let the glue bond over the course of about 10 minutes, and then you should be good. You're all ready to stamp this door jamb. So now that you've got your frame and door jamb all assembled, you can bring it over into position. I usually just set it down right in front of the door, leave the jamb legs just inside where the edge of the drywall and the rough opening ends, and just swing it up into position. Basically now, to hang the door, I do use the brad nailer to tack it. I know we've talked about the screws and we still screw it, especially in the critical spots where there's a lot of pressure on the jamb. but the brad nailer really helps you tack the door jamb and eases the process of trying to hold different things. It takes many doors to get quick and efficient at this process, and it still can be kind of awkward doing yourself, but fortunately I've done it a few times and I've got the experience on that. So when you stand this up, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brad nail and I'm just going to put it right there. We've got the line to show us where we should be putting our fasteners, so the stop hides it, but basically you want to get a shim in each of these 3 points and then just tack it here. What you want to do now before you get going too far, and I'm using this 2x4 wood block, I picked a nice straight 2x4, just forcing that bow. Usually they tend to bow down the headers, but before we get too far, we want to make sure that that header is perfectly level, because if it isn't, we do need to cut or pry up one side of that door jamb or the other to make sure that the header's level. If the header's not level, you're going to be off to a bad start and it's going to be a complete headache for you a little later. So from there, we level our hinge side. So you go from the header to the hinge side. You take your 6 foot level, everything needs to be straight and consistent. And you want to shim out as much or as little as you need to, but keeping an eye on the gap here and over here. You want to make sure that that gap is roughly the same, and that you have, a minimum of a 1/4 inch. This one is quite tight. Sometimes the framer leaves a little more for you there, and you'll have like a 1/2 inch on either side. But if the opening is framed level and square and plumb, you won't have an issue. But you do need room for shims regardless. You never just want to laminate this jamb right onto the 2x4 wall, because if that rough framing ever expands, contracts, you're going to run into issues down the road after you've got all your trim around the perimeter. Another very important note is to make sure that the jamb is flush with the drywall, or as much as it possibly can be. Sometimes the drywall goes on and it's a little wonky, but also sometimes the wall's out slightly, and you do have to shift this jamb one way or the other in this direction to make sure it's level. So I work with the hinge side first, making sure it's level here and here. Now you can grab your hinges and you can put them both on the door and the jamb, but you want to make sure that those are separated. You don't want to have to try and line the door up and insert that hinge on with both sides of the hinges hanging off the jamb. We do need to take the pins out with a punch on our hinges and separate them, and then match them. Make sure that when you take apart that hinge that you're putting the same ones, whether they've got the 2 or the 3 prongs. You need to make sure that you've got matched hinges. So if you take apart a hinge, ensure that the top one, the matching pair to that, is the top one on your door, because all it takes is some of the machining to be out just slightly on those hinges, and you're going to run into problems having to try and tap them around to get that door on. And the easier the door pops on, which I'll show you next, the easier life is to get it on and swinging. So be prepared. You can see I've got some shims on the floor. I've got some shims beside me, because the first thing I'm going to do when I grab that door is I'm going to bring it in and set it on these shims and adjust from there. The shims allow you to hold it up into position until you can get one of the pins in. And I typically go for the top pin. So now that you got that top hinge pin started, you can work with the bottom and the middle. After you get the first one in, it's going to be a whole lot easier. It can be challenging. Sometimes you have to tap the hinges. And by tap, I mean not beating on them. You can make some slight adjustments by tapping up or down, but you're looking for millimeters of adjustments here. You can't be pounding on these, because it's going to pull them away from the door and bend things and twist things and mess everything up for you. So pins, Should be going in nice and easy. Again, a couple slight taps with the hammer is okay. But by the time you get to that last pin, you should pretty much be able to just force it in by hand. So now that we've got the door jamb shimmed, I'll show you what I'm talking about when I say reveals. So you can see that that line between the edge of the door and the inside edge of the jamb is consistent. Maybe a little challenging for you to see on camera here, but basically we've got the exact same gap there, and you should have that consistently around the whole perimeter of the door, okay? If you don't, something's slightly out of whack, and that's the first thing we look for as professionals. There's something wrong with the door. If those reveals are out to lunch, we know that it hasn't been hung plumb level or square. So another thing to note is the areas that you absolutely must have shims behind. So that's all 3 hinges, these top edges, and then at the very bottom, because that's where all the pressure points are. And on your latch side, you should have something at the latch. And then again, the top and bottom, but we usually shim throughout the center as required based on what our jamb is doing. So if it's got a big bow out or in, we shim or screw to make that reveal look as nice and tidy as it does. So to cut the shims off, you can use a utility knife, but I prefer to use this oscillating cutting tool. It's got a nice wide flat blade, and we can set it right on the jamb. We don't want to push too hard or get the teeth of the blade into the MDF jamb, but it literally allows you to just whack these off flush and quickly. Another thing that this tool is really handy for, and typically we would set all these jambs up about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch with little blocks off the concrete to accommodate for our finished flooring. So the last thing you're gonna have to do with hanging your door is set the door stop. So you're gonna wanna take one of your knob or lever sets and take out the actual mechanism that turns the handle, the latch plate. With this one, the handles come off and are detachable, so you're gonna want that in your pocket. First, sliding in the latch. Then the door mechanism or door knob mechanism. Okay, now what you can do is close the door. You can see there's quite a bit of play in there. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our door stop, and this is very important where this is set. Now, keeping in mind that these doors aren't painted, neither is the jamb, and we still have to caulk the side of the stop here. So we need to make sure that we have about, I would say, a small 1/8 from the edge of the door here between that door stop on the latch side. So something like this. And keeping in mind, most latch plates, you can adjust the door tighter to the stop. So you're better to leave a slightly little more gap as opposed to having it too tight. And then you'll just nail the stop on. It's also important to note that you've got the door pushed into position and it's not just kind of naturally sitting. You're just going to want to apply a little pressure so you know that the latch is tight to the plate. So now that you have the latch side of the doorstop on, you're going to fit the header piece, making sure that this corner is flush. Tack the nail, starting there. So now on the hinge side, the doorstop actually doesn't really even serve a whole lot of purpose. Your hinge is going to keep the door fixed here. That being said, leave more of a gap. It doesn't have to be, you know, a 1/4 inch, but say a good 1/8, because again, you don't want the doorstop getting caught on the door after everything is caulked and painted. Again, just making sure that gap is all even. And you should be good. Thanks for joining us again. I hope this could help with how to hang an interior door. Please subscribe below and stay in tune for next week. We're going to show you how to install the casing around the interior doors. You can also check us out on Facebook and online on our website at www.cbrannonconstruction.com. Thanks, see you again.